Hi, everyone. First of all, sorry for technical difficulties if you've been waiting on the web page. We have, which we didn't say this morning, we have totally new systems because the system that we used to use through Google and YouTube was canceled at the start of August. They just stopped doing that thing. So we have new systems and sometimes there are kinks. But this session will run for a full 45 minutes. So even though it's going to go past the time to go into the next session, it will be archived here on the page. So if you've been waiting for it, we are finally here. So I'm very happy to introduce, and actually for the gathering, it's a reintroduction. Likely if you're here, it's because you've seen them share their amazing work before. We're here in session 1, workshop 1, called Centering the Voices and Experiences of Bilingual Latinx Students in Our Classrooms for grades 3 through 8. And I'm joined by Carla España and Herrera, who will be sharing their work with you. And as I said, if you're like, yay, it's finally live, we will go a full amount of time. So if you need to move to another session, you can come back and watch the recording, though chances are you won't want to go. So I'll just welcome you both, Carla and Luz, welcome.
Hi, thank you, Chris, so much for the intro.
And thanks everyone for your patience. Thanks for waiting around. And I see people on Twitter, and I'm just so happy that we have this opportunity and this platform to share with you today. And because you've been patient for the last, 30 minutes, we are gonna give you a wonderful announcement. And so we're super excited to share with you that in the next 45 minutes, this presentation that we are going to go through with you and share some things with you, it's actually a preview of our forthcoming book that Luz and I got to collaborate on together. Do you want to give them more news, Luz, some details?
Yeah, sure. So we have a title. It's really exciting to actually have a title. And we saw a bit of a preview the other day, and it's just so exciting. It's actually coming into life, into fruition, all of this. I mean, it's been a work of, over 2 years, 2.5 years, I lost count. But so our title is En Comunidad, Centering the Voices and Experiences of Bilingual Latinx Students. And do you want to share the other?
Yes, so it's coming out early 2020, so look out for it. And we're thankful that Heinemann is our publisher, and we are working with the Heinemann team. And so we wanted just to let you know, we thank you for your patience. We thank you for sticking around, and we're just going to go through a little bit of a preview. We took some of the principles from the book, and it's basically an approach to teaching bilingual Latinx students. Whether you are a monolingual teacher and you have this population in your classroom, or you're a bilingual teacher and you're teaching in a bilingual dual language setting, or in a bilingual, in some places called English as a new language setting that might not, you might be told you can't use, certain tools or certain language practices, and you're, as a bilingual person, you are doing what you can to support your students. We are excited for the work that we've been seeing teachers do all these years. So without any more delay, let's begin. So on our cover slide that I don't think they got to see earlier, so Luz is going to share it now with you. We wanted to let you know where you can follow us on Twitter, and we'll share later on a little bit more of our links of work that Luz and I have been able to collaborate and write together. When you find this amazing writing partner, your life changes. So I've been really thankful to have Luz as my writing partner. And so you can follow us on Twitter. You can look us up at our institutions. I am now in New York, and I teach at Bank Street College. I'm in their bilingual TESOL program.
Yes, and I'm Luz Herrera. And of course, I'm super grateful to have Carla as writing partner as well. And really quick shout out to our editor, Toby Antao, actually from Heinemann, who really just helped move us along. But anyway, getting back to us. So Luz Herrera, and I'm faculty at Fresno State. And I teach multiple subject credential students, and also students in the master's program for multilingual and multicultural education.
And our teaching journeys began, we're actually taught in similar neighborhoods. And here in New York, I was teaching middle grade in a bilingual setting, and then worked with teacher educators who are also teaching bilingual students. So we're speaking on what we love, and the fact that our own personal journeys have brought us here. as bilingual beings, it just means that we always have to start with ourselves and our journeys. And so that's what we wanted to encourage you with. As one of our principles that we have in our approach to teaching and centering the voices of bilingual Latinx students is we can't teach what we don't know. We can't teach who we don't love. And so in this centering, it means that we have to unpack our assumptions about our students. And we all come with assumptions, whether we've been taught those assumptions about certain populations in schools because we haven't been given different voices in our history classes, and we've just been taking this all in. And some of us in language minoritized communities have internalized a lot of those messages. And so it means that we are constantly having to check ourselves, right? And sometimes we need to find those thought partners to really help us correct those assumptions. And a lot of the work that Luz and I have been doing throughout even our grad program at the Graduate Center under the advisement of La Profesora Ofelia Garcia, it was seeking that community, right? Seeking those thought partners. And sometimes we had those in person, and sometimes now we're thankful for the Ed Collab because those thought partners have been, online, and communities like Educolor, communities like Clear the Air, communities like Disrupt Text have become a part of our ways as educators and teacher educators to really grow, right? And really, how do we become a part of a sustainable practice and community? That's really important because this work is never ending. And so we have to start with ourselves. And we'll end this presentation with some resources to help you. And I know if you're already joining us, you're already, connecting with thought partners and to help us grow in this. And so we just wanted to put this out there. We can't just go ahead and purchase a scripted curriculum or purchase a book without starting the internal work of unpacking the assumptions and our ideas about our students.
Yes, absolutely. And I wanted to just share a little bit about my own experience as well. Is I taught in New York City public schools for about 7 years before I decided to go back into school and get my doctorate. And I was an ESL teacher. And I think that is what, that experience and seeing kind of a disservice that I was seeing that was happening, I decided to pursue bilingual education. And really, this led me to also learning about translanguaging and just studying translanguaging and engaging with translanguaging theory and pedagogy. And this is part of also what we're going to share as well. So for us in our text, in our book, we engage, or we think about the ways that we can engage our students' entire linguistic repertoires. And we have a variety of ways that we can do that. And our text presents a variety of lessons that we can engage with our students. And all of these have recommendations as to how we can support translanguaging practices that our students already do, right? As bilingual people, we already translanguage in our everyday lives. So how can we support that use of translanguaging in the classroom? So we have some examples here. We, for instance, have a QD NICEB guide that we love to refer to because it really has very specific ways that teachers can engage in supporting their students' linguistic repertoires. And anybody can do this. Anybody can support translanguaging in the classroom, whether you're bilingual or not. But you also, and Ofelia Garcia always says, right, it takes a very specific kind of teacher to engage with these practices. It takes a type of teacher that sees their students as a co-learner, right? And that's what has to happen here. We have to see our students as knowers, right? We have to see that they have this very specific expertise, and we can use that in the classroom for teaching and learning.
And if I could just say something, because you started explaining as translanguaging is it's like the language practices of bilingual, multilingual people. I love the definition and the way Ofelia and Camila Leiva, who was a high school New York City teacher, when I met her in New York, in their article that I'll share online later, Ofelia and Camila, they break down translanguaging as in three parts. One is the language practices, right, as you described it, but also as a pedagogy, right, as a method of teaching. And so some of those resources on that screen that you were just sharing show that it's like using certain texts, right? So if I'm like reading, Isabel Quintero, que is so beautiful, me hizo llorar. I was like all emotional with this. It's like, as she says, it's a love letter to her father. So I might be doing a read aloud, right, using this book, and then students might be using translanguaging in their conversations, but I might also have charts with my vocabulary in English and Spanish. So I'm using translanguaging as a method of teaching, and because I'm validating students' language practices, it's translanguaging is a method for social justice. And those are the three ways that they find in that article. So I always love to refer back to that because it keeps me grounded in those different aspects of using translanguaging in our instruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the books that we're going to share with you today engage with translanguaging in the text. And the text that Carla just shared by Isabel Quintero, that text is actually available in English and in Spanish, but the English version, it engages with translanguaging. I mean, it uses translanguaging. And so you see just a fluid sort of use of language throughout the text. And again, just kind of reflecting on how bilinguals actually language. And it's a nice representation of that.
I love how you said how bilinguals language, like, because it's like something we do, right? Language as a practice is not this static thing. And so just for that screen, if you linger there for a moment, because at the end we will share more resources with you, but the bookends ones, so the first and the last one are from the CUNY NYSEB work, and that's CUNY CUNY NYSEB NYSIEB. And the first one, which was recently released like 2 weeks ago, and then it's for those in dual language bilingual settings. The last one is for anybody in any setting. And then the Latinx and Kidlit is a resource. Every time I get asked for like book lists, just like, you have to go here, and it's helping me find text. And then the third one is actually a teacher, Pia Persampieri. We feature her in our book. And so I wanted to share that she uses a lot of translanguaging and she was reading Alma. Oh yeah, she was reading Alma y cómo obtuvo su nombre. Alma and how she got her name with her fourth graders. And there's videos also. We have videos on the CUNY NYSEB website that we'll also share at the end. And that is actually a video from teacher Gladys Aponte, who was actually my colleague now. And Gladys is also working on her doctorate in this field. And Gladys was talking about how the author Julia Alvarez was using her language practices and using certain words in Spanish in her book. So a lot of resources out there. When we get asked them, like, if they exist, we just got to keep amplifying these voices. And always centering the fact that this is authentic to communities that navigate their language practices like this.
Absolutely.
And so the next, so besides starting with ourselves, right, thinking about our own journeys and our own assumptions when we come to the classroom, right, we have to come to terms with those, and then start getting to know, students' language practices and how we get to use translanguaging in our instruction. We also need to get to know students' journeys. And these are just some of the many, many, many books that we've just had so much fun in the last 2 years as we've been writing together and reading. We've just been spending a lot of time reading children's books in making sure we have some examples to share with teachers and thinking about how we can get different kinds of stories. And so in Soñadores by Zuzi Morales, you have, the journey that she shares about her and her son coming from Mexico, and really the challenges and obstacles that are presented when you come here to the States, and how the library became this like refuge for them, right? And so that's one kind of story, and how seeking in books, seeing these stories and finding your communities there. In Mango Abuela y Yo, which we've used a lot in my teacher preparation program with pre-service and in-service teachers, I've loved how we've gotten really emotional because we've all talked about how our experiences with our families and our language practices are so different. Like there's just not one similar story or like same. So for some of us, it's been like in this story, the grandmother and the grandchild kind of navigate the learning English, learning Spanish together. And so like Medina, as she just always does so beautifully in her writing, like it moves us because we get to know how their relationships grow and language practices being at the center of them. And in El Día que Descubres Quién Eres, which is the Spanish translation of The Day You Begin, you know, we love Jacqueline Woodson, and Rafael Lopez is just, I don't know, he just like illustrates like every other book I keep looking. I'm just amazed at the conversations we've had with children also engaging with this text, talking about like, how do they feel when they get into these communities where they might feel that they are made to feel like different, and different not being like a good thing, and how this book celebrates, you know, who you are, right? So it reminds me a lot of Monica Brown's like Marisol McDonald, you know, esa serie, the series of books. And so getting to know students' journeys could be through, you know, reading a community. And in the next slide, I just wanted to show you what we mean by that. We wanted to call this experience reading in community as opposed to read aloud or reading to kids, because we're familiar with like setting up, you know, these moments in the classrooms when you read together. And you might say, you know, I picked this book because we're starting, you know, school, and it's like the beginning of the school year. Or I picked this because we have our new friend joining us this week. And you do your book intro, which is like really common. You might talk about the author. You might do a little bio on the author. We wanted to add a little bit more in terms of what that might look like if you're more intentional about the language practices in the books, but also being much more intentional about when will students get to like participate and read out loud and like hear their voices, and notice that, let's say if it's Spanish or any other, you know, languages, Spanish is not the only one, but in the bilingual Latinx community, but in highlighting their language practices, what are we doing that for, right? Like Chris in the intro this morning was talking about like, what is literacy for, right? Which reminded me a lot of the Paulo Freire, like when you teach, who are you teaching for? What is this for, right? In that beautiful book, Letters to Those Who Dare Teach. I love it. So it made me think a lot about like, what is this experience for? Is it for me to just sit, get a book, and like you could hear my voice all the time? And then when I say, all right, I'm going to pause and you're going to share, it's like 30 seconds and then I get to read more. What if our students actually got to like read with us out loud, and they got to see that their language practices aren't used for the reason of, ¿cómo se dice? Like, I'm going to use your Spanish in order to get you to the English, right? Which is this like assimilationist philosophy of like, oh, so you know something, I'm going to use it to get you quick to English. But as opposed to that, it's saying like, actually, it's beautiful to have all your language repertoire in this book, as the author shows, in your life. And we're going to use that in our conversation. So yes, read this scene out loud with me. Yes, we're going to put those words on chart paper and it should be up. So we really encourage a little bit of more that kind of intentional planning with your books. And then we just wanted to share a little bit of a quote from that section from our, that's our third chapter in the book, where we talk about reading in community. And we really do believe in the strength, wisdom, and healing across community knowledge. Abuelita knowledge, like Navas has taught us, and other funds of knowledge that are often dismissed in schools. Acknowledging these ways of knowing and bringing them into our curriculum validates what students have learned from their families and creates spaces for students' bilingualism and their Latinx identities.
And just, I think building on that, right? We have a variety of just ways that we share in our text as to how can we conduct this shared reading and writing through poetry. And I want Carla to share about this, because this is really her area of expertise.
Oh my goodness, we need more poetry in our lives. And so one of the ways that, actually, I'll start with the obstacle, because usually when we do this work in schools, right, I was working with a second grade team a little over a year ago, where I would go every Thursday to this classroom. And I was super intimidated, because any of you who've taught like middle grade or high school, you know that it's very different when you go into, you know, K1 to the little grades. And so I was like super out of my comfort zone. And those children and those teachers in that second grade classroom in El Barrio at a bilingual, bicultural school, oh my, they welcomed me. They just made me feel so much better. And because they just loved, there was just a lot of singing, like a lot of shared reading. I was like, yes, this is the stuff I keep saying. We got to do more in the upper grade. So I love that I was seeing all this in the second grade. But one of the issues that came up was that there was just not enough time to include more poetry, because there was just a lot of things on the agenda. And, you know, there are a lot of initiatives. So those teachers watching and listening, you know how that goes, or there's just a lot of new initiatives and you're just always trying to catch up. And so what we decided to do is, well, why don't we start saying, like, could we do a little poetry like 3 days a week? And if it's just like 10, 15 minutes a day, and as soon as the kids walk in, we're gonna just read some poetry together. And so we started developing these plans where it'd be like across the week, we'll just do like a poem a week. And it's something that I had done as a middle school teacher. And for me, it was a poet a month. And so I just started collecting like a lot of text sets of like different kinds of poems with these teachers, as well as with the middle grade and other upper elementary grade teachers. And so here are just some to get you started, right? Going from picture books with the illustrations that Rafael Lopez did in the book by Margarita Engel, that's available in Spanish and in English. And I'm going to be honest with you, like the way I started using this book, it came from Amia Soto Carrion. She's a teacher who I visited her classroom. She was one of my students, and I visited her classroom. She had this book. And I was like, whoa, look, you can learn so much about different biographies. Next thing you know, I take it to my classes with the student teachers and teacher educator and the teachers in my teacher education program. And a lot of them hadn't heard about some of the figures in the book. And so it became like a learning process. Like I said, this is where we got to keep undoing the histories that we've been taught. And I've been using that book a lot with adults. And so using the poetry in that book with biographies, they call me Güero, like David Bowles, that book, I've used it like everywhere I travel. And as a novel in verse has been really powerful to be using that story. And then the Poet X just came out in Spanish too. So I'm excited to use that one in Spanish. But I've been using a lot of that in like workshops with teachers and students and writing their own poems. And so if you, Luz is gonna share the next screen, we decided to tackle that obstacle that sometimes comes up, right? Where teachers have sometimes said, I don't have enough time to do poetry, or I don't, there's just so many initiatives, right? And so if you go back to the previous one, Luz, I think it's the one with the different, oh, the next one, sorry. I'm trying to find the whiteboard, that one. So maybe planning to use a poem across a week like we did in the second grade class, or maybe planning across a month and you have a poem a week on different themes. And so we'd love to, you know, if you could with your students and keep us posted, because we love getting these updates on how teachers are being creative and including this work on a weekly basis, and planning across a year. Maybe you do a poet a week, which is what I did as a sixth grade teacher. And that was really beautiful because we got to get to know a lot of poets. And we do talk about in chapter 6 of our book on poetry as resistance to like these dominant master narratives that have been kind of ignoring the voices of our language minoritized students. Poetry as healing, as a way that students who even have had these traumatic experiences within schools, because schools tend to be inducing a lot of trauma in a lot of students, and how poetry has been as a way to heal from those experiences. And poetry as teaching, like it's been teaching us about people that we hadn't learned. It's been teaching us about the power that we have in amplifying our voices, right? And so, yes, we'll go back to that quote. I forgot about that one.
So this is a quote from our text, from our book. And just we highlight the importance of getting to know a variety of bilingual Latinx student experiences or Latinx experiences. We've switched gears from building community and developing counter stories to sustaining community and understandings. Also, in embedding more student-centered work, such as shared reading, the creation of text sets, and rehearsals for performance, poetry becomes like Roque Dalton says, for everyone. And the final practice that we wanted to share with you today, and this is also from our book, is as teachers, I think we have the responsibility to see the connections between school, government policies, and how that impacts their lives. And so we've dedicated a chapter to showing an approach to how teachers, educators might teach in this way. I mean, of course, I don't have to tell you the socio-political climate that we've just been experiencing for many years or several years now. And so, I mean, I feel this is always important. It's definitely very important now. And so what we've done in our book, and what we are presenting here today is just a few ways that we can use where we can pair text, stories with informational text to help students make sense of headlines, right? To help students or to engage students, I don't know, just get them to talk through what they're feeling, what they're seeing, and just have a sense of community and build a sense of support in the classroom where they can feel that they can share, they can feel that they are safe, and they can feel that their families are safe. So for instance, we have Carmela Full of Wishes here by Mate La Peña, and Christian Robinson's the illustrator here. And Carmela, Carmela Full of Wishes tells a story about a little girl who is, it's her birthday, and she wants to make a wish. She finds this dandelion. She wants to make a wish. And as she's sort of scooting by through her neighborhood, she sees, the hardware stores where the day laborers are kind of hanging out and waiting for work, really, and how her dad used to wait for work there before he was deported. And we never really get to hear what her actual wish was, but we kind of imagine that it's probably to be reunited with her dad so that she can see him again. And those kinds of realities, those kinds of stories are real for many children. And we can use this with some informational texts. For instance, Time for Kids has some resources, and news. I don't know. Actually, I keep saying News Nocella, but I don't know, Newsella, ELA, Newsella, but I'm not actually sure how to say that. But I've actually found that that's really a nice resource for kids. You can adjust it to a variety of reading levels, and it's also, many articles are also available in Spanish. I've only seen Spanish, English available, but maybe in the future there will be more. And we also have, books like From North to South, and it's a bilingual side-by-side book, Del Norte al Sur. And actually, Carmela Full of Wishes is actually available as well in Spanish. And we have Somos como las nubes by the incomparable Jorge Argueta, of course, and it's just a book of poetry, actually, and it's kind of hard to get away, right, from poetry. Well, we don't really want to, but it's just a beautiful just way to share the stories of Central American migrants, and really just humanizes their stories, right? And it's just, I mean, I could go on, but another one. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for me, it was really like emotional and thoughtful process to watch Luz go through like the lesson planning for these kind of topics. One, I feel like Luz, you actually did this work with students for your research, right? For your dissertation. And so, and it was, you actually like looked at the way media presented undocumented children, and the fact that it was something that you like got to listen to children. And I feel like because that's at the root of this work, you listen to a lot of children's stories, you listened, and then in our conversations, what we haven't shared with you here are some excerpts where we have where we said we have to make sure that we are protective, like we're looking out for students. And so we take heed the words of Dulce Mariflecha, and thinking about trauma-informed practices, and knowing that we're not going to be like forcing people to share their stories, just creating the spaces for those opportunities. And so what we do have is like, we're going to share these texts. We're going to share with Jorge Argueta through that beautiful, bilingual poetry book, these experiences. We're going to have these articles, and we're going to talk about how schooling affects us and our resistance to it, right? And creating our like text to resist those, the dominant narratives that don't portray us lovely. So I just want to just like shout out Luz and thank you for being thoughtful in that, because that takes thoughtful planning, and that's why we can't wait to like share the whole the whole chapter with you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the work, that research focused on the undocumented or the unaccompanied children, the vast numbers of unaccompanied children that were being detained at the border. And we used a multimodal text to learn about their experiences and just hear sort of, from them directly, the primary sources, as the primary source, right? Not necessarily just kind of hear it from a news report, but actually hear the testimonials of the children. And I think that's a really big part of this as well, like using informational texts, seeing the connections between policies and the impact of on students' lives, but also being able to engage with a variety of just ways of learning about this information. And again, like Carla mentioned, just creating these spaces and creating hopefully a space that is safe enough for children to share, but also not, for the children not to feel like pressured in any way to share these stories.
And then I keep referring back to, even this week, I was at a meeting with faculty at Bank Street, and I had mentioned Jeff Duncan Andrade's article on critical hope. And we keep going back to that and saying, like, we're going to be aware of these policies. We're going to talk about the resistance to injustice, and we're going to we're going to be hopeful, but it has to be this like critical hope, right? And so that's another resource that we'll share with you, or if some of you are on Twitter, as I look to my right where I have my desktop with the tweet deck, and like everyone's saying, like, if you have that article, it's great. Is Jeff Duncan's article on critical hope. I forgot the title, something, a hope for educators. Because it's based on Roses and Concrete, right? So yeah. Okay, we'll keep going because we have, I think 14 more minutes.
Jeff,
so we're going to finalize.
I feel like I always show. Oh, okay, yeah. But by the way, check out the Roses and Concrete TED Talk by Jeff Duncan Andrade. I always show that in my classrooms, and it's just an amazing talk. All right, so this is a quote. We're adding little bits and pieces from our book here. This is a quote from this chapter that talks about how we can make those, or help engage with those connections, right, from policies and the impact on students' lives. And so this is from our book. These lessons teach our students to discern the humanizing nature of master narratives, to identify the resistance of counter narratives, and to approach the experiences of minoritized groups with empathy and an open mind. So, sorry. So just moving forward, we mentioned CUNY NYSEB earlier. This is a project that I was involved in grad school and at CUNY. And we have a variety of, I still say we, I guess, yeah, we're still part of the CUNY NYSEB family for life, but have a variety of resources that are completely, free, and you can download. For instance, these two texts, and the first one, which is new, this was actually new to me as well. And the second one is I'm quite familiar with, because I've been using it for years in my classes. And then we have also a number of webinars or archived webinars that we have that you can access, as well as, to talk, and teachers talk about how they use translanguaging pedagogy in their classrooms. And they represent a variety of settings and a variety of grade levels as well.
Yeah, so for those of you looking for videos that you want to watch with your administration at your schools or in teacher teams, you're like, oh, you want to see what does this look like, right? What does it sound like? So in those are just pictures of some of the videos. So when you go to the website and you go to the resources, you have like these teacher videos, and they span like K-12. And so some are like high school English classrooms with students who speak several languages in the classroom, to like, let's say Gladys, the third one in the first set of pictures on the bottom, who is in specifically a dual language bilingual English-Spanish setting, and how she was looking at Julia Alvarez text. So very useful. Like some of it could be like, you could read some of these guides in preparation for your meetings with your teachers, and then you could also watch some videos together. So we're all about learning in community. That's what like our text really highlights, is that this is a process you shouldn't be doing on your own. And that's why we present together, we learn together, we write together, we share.
En comunidad.
Exacto. Next one. So the next set of resources are some texts for your own teacher, study groups. If you want to do, a book for the fall, a book for the spring. Toma la Palabra is actually based on the research and work of the team Literacy Squared. That's the book next to it by Literacy from the Start. And this team of researchers really are advocating for biliteracy. So not just that assimilationist perspective of let's use your home language or your Spanish to get you to English, but like let's really develop your language practices. And so in Toma la Palabra, Monica Lara has beautiful charts and examples of all these strategies and what they look like. And so they're great if you're like a first year teacher, second year teacher, you're just starting and you just want to see how this might look like. It's also great if you're mentoring other teachers and you're hosting them. I'm always asking for people if they could host some of my students and my student teachers in their classrooms. So it's great for them to see some of those examples. And then the Translanguaging Classroom by Ofelia Garcia, Susana Ibarra-Johnson, and Kate Seltzer really go through what translanguaging looks like in those different settings. Like the videos show you like the K-12 settings, and different could be, you're a monolingual teacher teaching students and your classroom reflects, several language practices. Then this text is really helpful. And the Christina Selick one we were using for years in our teacher ed program because of the useful ways to get to know students and the templates that had helped people get all this, gathering this data, right, to get to know their students' language practices.
And the Translanguaging Classroom book, I use that in my classroom, in my teacher ed prep all the time. And what students really like about that, what my future students like, sometimes my student teachers, pre-service teachers really love about it, is that it offers just a variety of kind of like a case study, and looking at how teachers can engage with translanguaging pedagogy, and just really makes it really simple to follow, and just really clear. And I think sometimes teachers ask, well, what does this look like in the classroom? And I think this is a really nice example of what that looks like in the classroom, what translanguaging looks like in the classroom. And we also have some podcasts that we recommend for educators. This is NPR Code Switch. A lot of my classes that I teach focus on language, on the connections between language and culture, which of course you can't separate, right? But Code Switch has been a really great resource, and I use a couple of their episodes to embed in my class, because I've been kind of trying to replace some of the readings or add on to the content of my class or my syllabus with podcasts, because there's such great information and there's just such great content. So it's a resource that I feel like maybe we don't tap into too much in like official classroom settings or in official university settings. So I've added a number of podcasts into my syllabi. So Code Switch is one of my go-tos, as well as Cult of Pedagogy. Carla introduced me to that, and I just I just love Jennifer has a bunch of guest speakers in her podcast. So she had Pedro Noguera the other day and talking about what equity looks like in the classroom. And I actually used that episode in my classroom. And we also have the Children's Book Podcast, which is an amazing resource that teachers can tap into. And Matthew interviews children book authors. I mean, everyone, I think probably all of the ones that we're sharing today probably have been interviewed, right, by Matthew. And they're probably here in the Children's Book Podcast. So you can listen to the author's own sort of perspective on their book and learn about their writing in that way as well.
And then some of the ones to add, because there's so many, but just my top three that I use a lot with teachers when we are planning curriculum together is a Latino USA, because of the story. So one of the principles is like getting to know what are the policies, what's happening that directly impact students. Like Latino USA has episodes on that. And so I share those with teachers. Also Radio Ambulante, and Radio Ambulante, it's an investigative journalism podcast in Spanish about stories from Latin America. And so for those of us who need to keep like on top of our history and present, because we haven't been taught a lot of these things, we have to do the work, right? There's no excuse. These are out there. And so I get on and like, wow, there's so many things I'm learning about Chile, where I'm from. I was like, oh, my parents, they told me one part, but I didn't know this other part happened. I'm learning a lot about countries where my students are from. And so Radio Ambulante is helping me. And it also helps with my Spanish. And I've been developing that and growing that, because that's something that when I was younger wasn't encouraged in my schools. And of course, LeVar Burton reads, because I can hear LeVar Burton all day. And the storytelling is beautiful because you get to know all these stories, and it's for adults. But also the way he introduces the text and reflects on the text at the end. Really, I think we should all listen more to LeVar Burton reading short fiction. And so we're going to end here. Yeah. Yes, it is. And so we have 5 minutes left, and in those 5 minutes, the last one, I forgot books. Yeah, we have more books. Go ahead, Luz.
Yeah, so actually the one in the center right here, Culturally Sustaining Pedagogies, that is my course text for my signature class at Fresno State. And it's Culturally Sustaining Pedagogies. My class is Culturally and Linguistically Sustaining Pedagogies. And this is our main text. I mean, we just really hear from a variety of authors. It's chapters, it's edited text, right? So chapters are written by a variety of authors like Jonathan Rosa and Nelson Flores, Gloria Ladson Billings, so many more, gifted scholars that share their perspective on culturally sustaining pedagogies and what this looks like in the classroom.
Yeah, and so we encourage you to check Jonathan Rosa's book, Angela Valenzuela's book, and Nelson Flores, his blog. And so we want to wrap up to give you time to transition, and tech team and everyone to transition to the next time. And so what we'll do is we'll definitely go to Twitter now and follow up on any questions. So please go ahead, ask away. And I know you'll go to your sessions during the day. So we'll just keep checking on this throughout the day. But we just want to thank you for joining us, for your patience earlier. And we look forward to engaging with you on this topic.
Thank you both
thank you
very
so
much.
much. Bye.
Thank you. Twitter has been on fire with everything that you guys have been sharing. So we really appreciate you spending your time and energy with us again. It's just so great to host both of you each time. So thank you very much. And to everyone that's watching live, we have 2 great sessions that are coming up right now. We have, and actually our whole day was just like moved back a little bit because we had some tech glitches that some things had changed in technology that we a week ago did not know were happening, but we think we're ironing things out and we're about to get all cut up. So we've moved our session number 2 back just a teeny little bit to make sure that everyone can transition, and then the rest of the day should flow better. But session 2 will be starting very soon. One of them is Literacy as a Vehicle for Connection and Caring with Joellen McCarthy and Tori Maldonado, and Disrupting Colonization in Your Classroom with Tricia Varia and Christine Nolds. So we're very happy to have them. Thank you one more time to Luz and Carla, and thanks to all of you for joining. Enjoy the next session.